Good morning, Excellencies, Excellency Keo Remy, the President of the Cambodian Human Rights Committee, Excellency Francis Huot from the Office of the Cambodian Office of the Canadian Embassy in Bangkok, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and members of the general public. It gives me a particularly special, great pleasure to welcome you all to today's public conference on human rights in Cambodia today. I'd like to thank, first of all, the Cambodian Human Rights Committee for collaborating with the UN Human Rights Office, which I represent, in collaborating with us in holding this event, and for the Canadian Embassy in Bangkok for its generous support, without which this wouldn't have been possible. I'd like to thank in advance the speakers, the experts who took time to share their expertise with us, and everyone here for taking time to join, including a number of people, as mentioned, from community-based organizations from the provinces, who I believe are going to serve as a reality check for many of the things that will be discussed. And I'm confident that we'll have an insightful day of discussions. I take particular pleasure in opening today's meeting to the public, because while there are countless seminars, workshops, and specialized fora taking place to deliberate many of the issues that we're going to discuss today, the general public often does not have a chance to benefit from such events and therefore may not have the chance to form a more complete view. During sensitive moments like this, as electoral periods tend to be, when everything is often seen from the perspective of, does this benefit us or them? It's easy to accuse and to be accused of bias, and nothing is more so seen in this light than human rights issues. And therefore, we felt, as the UN Human Rights Office, that there's a need to come together and debate them before all stakeholders, everybody with a point of view, and to get complete information in order to form an informed point of view. A lot is happening in Cambodia today, and indeed around the world. We have been witnessing the continuation, some would say the intensification, of old and new confrontations that are making many people anxious for various reasons. The United Nations was founded in the conviction that dialogue is always better than confrontation, that true peace cannot be achieved without it, and that the foundation for peace is the respect for human rights. It is with this in mind, and at the risk of again being accused of being violent, that OHCHR has decided to organize this public conference on human rights in Cambodia today. We firmly believe that mutual understanding can only be achieved through dialogue, and there can be no meaningful dialogue without interaction from all sides. We will hear during the course of the day many things that you may already be aware of, but I'm certain that you'll also gain from new information and insights. My contribution this morning will be to set the stage by laying out the basics of human rights. It is no doubt a complex field, filled with legal language, with a lot of demands and risks. At the same time, for many people, it's also intuitive. If we ask anybody whether they know their rights, I believe most people will say yes. Everyone somehow knows when their rights are violated, even if they can't point to the specific law that says so. Ask anyone who feels that their rights have been violated whether they know what to do about it. And some may well know, but my guess is that most will look at us with a confused expression. Actually, where exactly will I find relief? Human rights is a changing field. Even if every person on earth knows or can feel when something is wrong, not so long ago, there was not much that they could do about it. There was a dark period in every country's history, this is universal, a dark period when life was so controlled that everything that was not explicitly allowed was prohibited. Slowly, often with a struggle, people came to claim more control over specific matters and demand more humanity in society, resulting in, among other achievements, universal suffrage, the end of slavery in the caste system, recognition of women's rights, and representative democratic systems. Slowly, the hard-won recognition of one right after another led to a psychological change in what was considered to be normalcy. We, the human race, successfully redefined normal to mean that all that is not specifically prohibited is permitted. We understand normal now to be a state of freedom that allows every one of us to live to our full potential, and through our own efforts and through a well-functioning government that delivers essential services. We define that state of normalcy in a series of legally binding international treaties that laid out the fundamental human rights that we decided belong to every human being for no other reason than their humanity. We do not have to explain human rights, they are within us. The United Nations often speaks about these treaties, and when asked if a particular issue is a human rights issue, I will consistently refer to the relevant treaty norm in answering whether yes or no. Their importance derives not from the fact that they were enumerated in law by leading international experts, which they were. Rather, it is the simple fact that they represent universal values, that intuition that is within all of us. And when the experts came together to elaborate the treaties, they drew not from their imaginations, but from prevailing national laws, cultures, and reality from across the globe. What they agreed to in the treaties were not high aspirations to be achieved at some day when circumstances permit. They were the minimum standards that we agreed apply to every human being on earth today. And they lay out the specific ways in which every person is the master of his or her life. They are global values. And that's why it is so serious when human rights are violated. And that's why it's so contentious to say so. And that's why it is important to continuously strive for proper implementation, because legal standards, human rights do not implement themselves. They are implemented by people, by institutions. And for those that have less power in society to claim their rights, assistance is often needed. These values are Cambodian values. On the screen, I put out a few phrases that sum up what I'd like to say this morning in my remarks. Beginning with number 1, I ask whether you recognize this phrase. All powers belong to the citizens. That comes straight from the Cambodian Constitution. Although I have something to say about the difference between citizens and people, it is a striking statement that lays the foundation for human rights, which is developed in detail in Chapter 3 of the Constitution, which articulates many of the rights contained in the International Human Rights Framework. And I stress that internationally defined human rights are also Cambodian human rights. Not only are most of these rights reflected in the domestic legal framework, but they have been voluntarily accepted by Cambodia through ratification. They are Cambodian law. These shared values in their totality set out one basic truth, and I turn to point number 2, that every human being is equal in dignity and rights which are inalienable. No one can give human rights, and no one can take them away. The true humanist sees the level of development of a society through the condition, not of the best off, but the worst off in society. It took decades in the last century to redefine the concept of development from economic development to human development. And measured in this way, we found startling differences in the ratings of various countries, particularly the oil-rich countries of the Middle East. The human rights mechanisms had been recommending for many years that they undertake measures for fundamental reforms in their justice systems, on religious freedoms, on freedom of expression, the rights of women, among many. And meantime, the economic indices showed most of them to be well-off middle or upper middle income countries. The aggregate figures told the story of well-off countries, stable. They said they had other priorities and didn't need human rights advice. And a look at their human development indices, however, would tell a completely different story. Although certainly not the only factor, it's a complex region with many factors at play. The denial of human rights to major parts of their populations was nonetheless a big factor in what would then become the Arab Spring. One can't help but to wonder what that part of the world might have looked like today if the advice from the human rights mechanisms had been followed early on. The last two phrases on the screen are my way to explain in the simplest terms possible what human rights is all about. Number 3, I submit the phrase, we are all human. We all have aspirations for a better life, for ourselves, our families, our communities. We all make better informed choices in our lives when we have access to vital information and can contribute better when we are better educated and have decent work. We all have certain physiological needs such as food, shelter, clothing, sanitation, healthcare. We should have an equal voice in the way our families, communities, society, and country are managed. And that voice can only be used when we have freedom of expression, of peaceful assembly and association. These rights we have because we are all human. But we are only human. I turn to the last point. It is human nature in seeking to advance our lives to welcome advantages. It is human nature that we must live with our strengths and weaknesses, and that we sometimes use them to harm others. It is because we are only human that we make mistakes, and we tend to make more mistakes when no one's looking. That's why the human rights framework requires effective implementing institutions and structures that will regulate society to ensure us the peace and security needed to live our lives and to solve disputes fairly when they arise. But institutions serving the public's trust with such enormous responsibilities can and often do upset the power balance set out in my first point. If all powers belong to the people, it follows that the people should hold power over those institutions through independent oversight. And this is required under the human rights standards in specialized areas such as in torture prevention as well as general human rights protection. It's been repeatedly recommended to Cambodia that it establish an independent human rights institution, an independent election regulatory body, an independent judiciary, among many other mechanisms. In fact, every sphere of government activity should be subject to independent monitoring, whose findings will help then those implementing institutions keep abreast of the growing expectations of a fast developing country and its people, and to continually improve their performance. We are all human. We're only human. The human rights framework recognizes both. It has often been said that the human rights community treats Cambodia unfairly, that there are worst offenders in the world, and that we demand too much from a country that has suffered so much. It may be true that other countries have done worse when the international human rights system was less developed. I would emphasize here again, though, that the human rights standards are not an aspiration for someday, but are minimum standards for today. The human rights community, and by that I refer to everybody, everyone who cares about human rights becoming a reality. The human rights community does not discriminate in this regard. We do not rank countries against each other, simply press continuously for each country to improve relative to its own means and relative to its own record. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, my boss, just this week in a statement to the Human Rights Council, spoke about developments in 40 countries and regions across the globe, including those considered to be quite advanced in the field of human rights. Every country can do better and must guard against retrogression. The same applies to Cambodia. I'd like to close by saying a final word about human rights defenders. They are a special group of people who serve as a mirror of society and protectors of those most in need. Despite the enormous risks and challenges that they've been facing over the past few years, including here in Cambodia, but globally as well, they will continue to work because they are dedicated to serving the people. And in this regard, they're not very different from the many civil servants with whom we work closely trying to give life to the reforms underway, about which we'll hear more today. They should not need to risk arrest, intimidation, or worse to carry out their work. If they are seen as allies for a better future, I can guarantee that the public institutions will function better, not because the public servants are not doing their best, but because they, like all of us, are only human. And we strive today to get good recommendations from the same point of view of how we can help each other reaffirm our humanity, maybe even overcome it by creating the institutions, the rules in place so that we can all play our part as human rights, as claimants, holders of human rights, and as human rights defenders. And among that community, I count on everybody in this room today. I thank you very much for your attention.